Hello all, it's James Johnson, aka Sulfur Blade, and I'm here because I want to talk to you about the current insanity. I don't know. Maybe try to be a voice of reason and explain some terms and some concepts and give some unelicited advice. So first I want to start this out by listening to what I believe is the main and most pressing issue and concern facing the United States and Western society as a whole at this very given minute, and that is Marxism. And I'm going to show you a perfect example of what Marxism is.
Obviously, people are still out in the streets demonstrating. Most people are demonstrating peacefully. There are some elements, though, that those of us in the movement tend to be troublemakers or agents provocateurs, which are causing distractions. With all due respect, Chris, those of us in the African American community don't use the term riot, especially when it comes to the peaceful demonstrators. We use the term rebellion because this is a reaction to what has been happening.
Right, I want to point out that he said, and he is supposedly a mouthpiece for the peaceful protesters, and they are rebelling. Those are his words, not mine.
To us in America recently with the death of George Floyd and also over time. People, it is a total outrage here. We've not seen ongoing demonstrations like this since Dr. King was assassinated in 1968. I am grateful for you and others in the international community. We know they have been demonstrating.
So before he derails Martin Luther King here, well, he just derailed Martin Luther King. So the peaceful protests of the 60s were actually that. Martin Luther King never would he have supported the type of shenanigans and looting and well, deplorable behavior that's being done today. This is not the type of thing that the great esteemed Dr. Martin Luther King would have accepted. He would have denounced the actions of these people. He would not have supported them.
Demonstrations in solidarity where you are in Australia and around the world. We are grateful for that. And I want to say, I think that those around the world may as well get prepared for what we may have to ask of them. And that is to repeat what we did during the anti-apartheid movement. If something is not changed quickly, if there is no plan to change the lynching, the ongoing lynching of our people by police and armed vigilantes soon and very soon, if that does not change, we are going to call on the world community to unify in a divestment campaign.
So I just want to point out here that he's saying that his people are being lynched, and by his people he means people of color, and they are being lynched by the police, and they're being lynched by vigilantes. Now, there's no news coverage anywhere that supports the claim that any police anywhere in the United States have hung or hanged any black individuals during this rioting. Regardless of how a lot of conservatives feel, and that maybe they should have been hung, that's a whole different issue. But no, there is no truth to these words. These are purely words to try to paint an image that he wants to convey, and that's that the black people are being oppressed. That is his image he's trying to paint, is his oppression. Let's continue watching.
In the same way apartheid South Africa was divested from, the world community would be asked to engage in a divestment campaign from the United States of America.
Well, that's an extreme policy response. Let's walk through that a bit if we can, Mark Thompson. First up, the violence that you touched on. This is what's so difficult for people not directly involved and people around the world to understand. Anyone who's seen that video of George Floyd being killed by a police officer will have some sense of the absolute anger and outrage of not just the Minneapolis community, but African American communities right across your country. But how does it explode into this looting and violence on the streets that, as you say, hurts African American communities more than others?
Well, the President of the United States wants, we believe, a civil war. He is in.
So they believe that he's speaking for his group. That's something that you will notice a lot of when it comes to the oppressed Marxist person. Is they speak as we and us, not in the terms of me and I. He's not speaking for himself. He's speaking for all of the black Americans that have been oppressed by the police officers. That's his claim.
Many ways promoting chaos and confusion. As I said, many of the people carrying these deeds out are not indigenous to our community. They are troublemakers, and we saw that. I invite people to go back and look at 1968. Just 10 days before Dr. King was assassinated, there was a march in Memphis, and provocateurs turned that into the type of march that some of these we see are being turned into today. And that's done to discredit and distract from the issue. We've gone from focusing on George Floyd, not to mention Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and David McAfee in Louisville just the other night. We've gone from focusing on that to talking about the looting and the dastardly deeds of those carrying out the looting and whatnot. But we are
the dastardly deeds, as we watch obvious Americans. Most of them are of black skin tone. There are a few whites, but then again, you know, that's the gist of it, right? It's racism, or is it? I mean, are the white people there looting with the black people? Is that really a racist action? It looks like whites and blacks are getting together quite fine to loot. So, is this racist narrative really real?
ought to give as much more coverage to those who are peacefully demonstrating as we are those who are misbehaving.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, because no one could disagree with the cause. No one could disagree with the fact that what happened on that Minneapolis street should never happened. And of course, as you know all too well, has happened too many times in too many cities across the US. Why has the reaction been so different this time? Why has it been so widespread? Why has it been...
So, I appreciate Kenny. Sky News does a fairly decent job of reporting. They're an Australian news organization. So if you've never heard of Sky News, this is an Australian group. They're probably Australia's Fox News, to be honest. They are definitely lean to the right on many issues. Sadly, news no longer avoids partisanship. Pretty much every news you see will have some sort of partisan spin. Sadly, Kenny is repeating the same mainstream media news narrative that the mainstream media in the United States has developed. And mainstream media in the United States, which does include Fox, but Fox is just one of, a group of 8, 9, 10 other news organizations. So when one mouth says one thing and 9 and 10, 11, 12 other mouths say something different, the one mouth has a hard time counteracting all the other mouths. And all the other mouths have pushed across this narrative that black people are being unduly targeted by the police, right? Because they don't show white people who have been unfairly targeted and or killed by police officers on the nightly news. That has happened this year. Just like blacks have died to cops, whites have died to cops. But we don't see that on the news because that doesn't spin the narrative they want, right? They only show when something happens that helps the narrative they want to spin. So let's continue
become
on.
A national and international incident.
Well, I think it's cumulative. It has built up. And so I think finally even well-meaning whites and even some who may not have had a history of allyship with the African American community are forever changed. They are saying, wow, this is real. African Americans are just killed at will. And I think that is what sparked the rage. And that's why we say, with this world community in the position that it's in, with this world...
So he just made the claim that African Americans are killed at will. By police officers last year, there were 10 African Americans that died at the hands of police officers. 10. Of those 10, 8 were completely legitimate defense. There was no crime involved or malfeasance by the officer. So 2 African Americans were killed by police officers in which the officers were found to have acted beyond their authority, and that there was malfeasance. So 2 African Americans were killed by police wrongfully last year in a population of over 400 billion people. Sounds very racist. It sounds like the African Americans are just being slaughtered like sheep all over the country because that's the way he makes it sound, right?
Community marching and demonstrating with us. It's time to seriously consider a global divestment campaign.
Well, I don't seriously think that's going to happen, but we'll see what happens. A lot of this is playing into the presidential election year, of course. But I was struck today when I listened to what Joe Biden had to...
And there's the other big gist of it, right? It is a presidential election year. It's a presidential election year where the left has gone insane. So let's think about what has been done during the Trump presidency. Since Trump has been elected, there's been Russia collusion, there's been Ukraine, there's been this, there's been that, there's been the Stormy Daniels thing. There's been 17 different allegations against Trump, and none of them have been proven. And in fact, right now, we are learning that most of these allegations were actually fabricated by the higher-ups in the FBI who were purposely trying to get Trump removed from office, utilizing quote-unquote information supplied by Hillary Clinton's campaign, bought and paid for, that was vetted and found out to not be actual credible information, and they used that to wiretap the incoming the duly elected incoming team, to the point to where they actually went after a 3-star general, General Flynn, on concocted bogus charges. It's unheard of. It's even Nixon was not this corrupt. I mean, this is corruption to a whole new level, and it's being unfolded right now. But that's not mainstream news right now, is it? No, mainstream news right now is riots. Mainstream news used to be the coronavirus. Mainstream news is anything that's not the huge black eye the Democrats are about to have land on them, because somehow the biggest political scandal to ever rock our nation is not even the first best story. It's not even the second best story. It's not even the third best story. No, we've got coronavirus coming in at the third best story. We have protests and riots across the country coming in at the second best story. And then we have the Chaz coming in as the first best story. I mean, if one was a conspiracy theorist, one would almost believe that all of this stuff is intentionally being done to distract from the huge black eye that the Democrats are about to get. One would actually start to think that maybe a lot of this is a desperate attempt to somehow win the presidency. The impeachment shit didn't work. The ripping up of the Trump's State of the Union hissy fit by Nancy Pelosi didn't work. The lies told to us for years by Adam Schiff didn't work. The Democrats know they're in deep doo-doo. Their actual person that they've nominated to run against our president is suffering from dementia and doesn't even know he's running for the presidency half the time. Half the time he claims he's running for Senate and that he's Joe Biden and he's going to beat Joe Biden, he says. I mean, the guy he's not there. He has no prayer to beat Trump. And so what are these? Are these Hail Marys? Is this like, well, if we can't beat Trump, we're just going to have a civil war? If I was a conspiracy theorist, I might think that way. I'm kind of thinking that way. I must be a conspiracy theorist. Anyway, let's continue on.
When he said it's time to end racism, the racial divide in his country, to end police brutality against African Americans, I couldn't help but be struck by the fact that this man was a vice president for 2 terms to an African American president. If no progress could have been made then, how quickly can we turn things around now?
Well,
and that's where we'll leave up this one. So I think Kenny hit the main point here. The last president of the United States was an African American president. You're going to claim the United States is racist at its core, but yet in the last president before Trump was African American? How does that happen in a racist country? Doesn't compute. The narrative doesn't add up. All right, so main purpose of this segment was just to basically teach you about Marxism, because you're going to hear this word a lot here in the near future, because it's very applicable to what's going on. And Marxists basically believe that they're oppressed. They are oppressed individuals. Marxism started in basically the oppression of poor people versus the rich people. The rich people were oppressing the poor people. That was the original indoctrination of Marxism. And since then, it has expanded. It's expanded in basically any type of MacGuffin you can throw in there that can be used as oppression. So, in some of these instances, white man oppressing black man. Okay, that's oppression. That is Marxism at its whole. It's taking identity politics, and it's claiming that one group is being oppressed by another group. That is Marxism in a very simplified nutshell. And that is what is happening right now, is we have all kinds of different groups claiming they're being oppressed. But are they really? No, they're not. The stats don't back up the narrative. All right, let's switch over to the Chaz. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out this reporting inside of Seattle's Anarchical Autonomous Zone, aka Chaz.
This zone last night.
I didn't take because he probably threw it. Who knows? No, I didn't.
Sounds like a joke. Now, it doesn't exactly seem like it's all peace and love there. What were we seeing in that video, Julio?
What I could say is when President Trump calls CNN fake news, there's a reason why that insult sticks. Basically, what was happening there was a young man that was surrounded by the crowd. He was accused of stealing, from what I could gather, he was accused of stealing a phone from another protester. And so they said that he was a thief and he was trying to get away. And they were asking him, well, if you're innocent, why are you running away from us? And the man was clearly terrified. And there, at one point, there was a guy with a baseball bat, and he shoved the baseball bat in the guy's face. And he said, I'm gonna beat you up. Fortunately for that young man, he was able to get away from the crowd, and it was then discovered that he didn't actually steal the phone. The phone was discovered at another spot. So, but you could imagine if the crowd decided.
So he didn't steal the phone. So as we saw there, that there were whites and blacks side by side, both feeling very oppressed. And they're taking their oppression out on the first person they saw. So this anarchical zone, right, is supposed to be a place without police, but yet they're running around pretending to be its police. This anarchical zone is supposed to be, you know, a group who believes that walls are bad and immigration is good, and yet the first thing they've done is set up checkpoints with actual armed individuals guarding the checkpoints. I mean, it's hypocrisy. It's complete and total hypocrisy. Basically, what we have going on in the United States right now is you have a huge group of, I would like to think, young Americans. I would like to think that older, wiser individuals aren't taking part in this, but I know that's not exactly true. I know that there's plenty of older and not so wise that are wrapped up in this because, you know, identity politics didn't start with this generation. Identity politics started in my generation. It's just become the rage. It's become the norm in this generation, where in my generation, people who practiced identity politics were a fringe group. You know, they were the radical left. Now the radical left is the normal left. So yeah. Now, at the beginning of the video, I said I have some advice, and I do have some advice. When you watch the news, depending on which news source you're watching, if you're watching Fox, you may get very angry at what you witness because They're reporting from a point of view that will be easy to anger a patriotic American who believes in their country, believes in capitalism and the American dream. If you're watching, CNN or something like that, you probably won't get angry. You probably will just you won't get the full picture of what's going on, because CNN reports Chaz as a block party. It's just a group of fun-going, happy-go-lucky individuals who are watching movies and eating popcorn and singing Kumbaya. But we obviously see that's not the case. It's not what CNN claims it to be. It's not what mainstream media claims it to be. It's very different. So where you get your news source is going to provide profoundly different reactions to you. Now, if you do get the right viewpoint, the right side, the right wing spectrum viewpoint, if you go from the Fox viewpoint, you might get very angry. And I got very angry last night when I found out about Chaz. I was a little bit livid. And I had very extreme thoughts. Let's just put it at that. And I think that's easy for everyone to do at this point in time, because everyone is very polarized. Everyone's very divided. Everyone's at far extreme spectrums. So what I would say to you, those that are like me, have some common sense, and see this craziness as craziness, I would suggest you stay far away from the craziness. Don't looky-loo. Don't rubberneck. Don't go anywhere near it. Stay away from it. Self-quarantine from the craziness is my advice to the sane people out there for now. I haven't reached the level of insanity that I believe we're in the middle of an armed rebellion type civil war. I do believe that the U.S. is in a cultural war. One could call it a civil war from the point of view of thought and idea. And we've been in this for 3 years now, since Trump got elected. I don't know what it is with Trump. Well, I do, actually. So I didn't vote for Trump. I don't know if you guys know this. I voted for Gary Johnson. Anyway, the reason I didn't vote for Trump is because I bought into the mainstream media narrative that Trump was bad. So many people told me Trump was bad, and everything I saw in the news said Trump was bad. There was just so much Trump was bad rhetoric that there was no way to denounce it. There was no way to go against the grain. And then Trump happened, right? Trump went in to Washington and did an amazing job. Lowered unemployment to record lows. Redid all of these trade agreements that I knew were bad, that I'd been calling to be redone for years. Trump went in and did them instantly. It's like Trump read my playbook and went and did everything I wanted done in government. And when you have a politician that finally does everything you've wanted a politician to do, how do you call him bad? And so you start to do some research. You start to hear the guy talk himself. You start to watch him actually give speeches. And when you sit there and you listen to him and you hear his... Well, he has an interesting way of speaking, right? It's not like most... It's not eloquent and charismatic like a lot of politicians. It's very... I don't know, more normal, like a normal person type speech. But you don't expect that from a president. You expect the president to use big fancy words and whatnot. But when a normal person, doesn't use big fancy words, you don't think anything of it. And well, Trump has a way of conveying things in, I guess, a plebeian, peasant-like way. Which is not as, which doesn't make, it doesn't fix our presidential picture we have painted in our mind. Anyway, once you get past that, and then you start to realize that his normal speech is refreshing, it's nice, it's good, he's actually funny, he makes jokes, and his jokes are comical, and then his jokes are taken completely out of context by the news, and then you see mainstream media spinning out of control things that he says and then completely takes him out of context. It's just amazing how many times I've watched the mainstream media completely take Trump out of context to try to create their own political narrative. When Trump took office and he was claiming fake news, I was a little sketchy about the whole fake news thing. But man, it's come true. It's obvious. The news is fake. And that was kind of an eye opener. I woke up. I had my aha moment. I realized Trump wasn't Orange Man bad. But there's just going to be so many people on the far left that can't. They cannot wake up. They're not going to have the aha moment because it's beyond their programming. They have something in their underlying computer code that says Trump bad, priority 1 overrides 2 + 2 = 4. So if Trump says 2 + 2 = 4, the extreme left is going to be like, no, it doesn't. It equals 5 because President Trump said 2 + 2 = 4. It can't be true because Trump said so. They've lost their marbles. They've just gone into such a Trump hysteria that they push their party so far left it's gone and fallen off the cliff and sunk into a hole of communism and Marxist rhetoric. That's another thing about Marxism. If you weren't aware, it was something used to push the communist narrative. Obviously, rich and powerful people need to give their money to the poor, and everyone needs to be equal. Blah 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 blah. And we're seeing that. We are seeing just so many young Americans actually falling for this AOC crap, this progressive crap that it's so disgusting. And I used to just laugh about it because I figured I would be dead before this stuff would happen, right? I really thought I was gonna die before I would see a Chaz happen in the United States, before I would actually see Americans uprise and try to claim an actual geographical section of the United States, be it 6 blocks in a city or a state or whatnot, but it's still an area that they're claiming has succeeded from the United States. It's its own independent country. So say them. And it just makes my head spin. I really thought I was going to be dead before this level of craziness would rock our country. But Trump happened. And I'm going to vote for Trump again. And things are only going to get worse. It's a strange dichotomy. It's like, I know the left is going to continue to bash themselves in the head with sledgehammers if Trump's elected. So I could maybe not elect Trump, and maybe the left would stop bashing themselves in the head with sledgehammers? No, I don't think that's going to happen. I think the madness has started. And I think Trump is certainly the ignition of the madness, but I don't think we can blame him. I'm certainly not going to blame him. He did a great job as president. How do you blame a president who works so hard to be a good president for the craziness that's going on in the country right now? I don't think you can. You have to blame the individuals that are doing the craziness. That's what I'm going to stick this to, is hold the individuals responsible, because if I am going to be sitting here claiming that everyone should think for themselves and not take part in the tribal mob mentality, then it makes sense that we not blame their tribe as a whole, but blame their tribe on the individual levels. And even as much as I want to just ban the entire Democratic Party from the country and exile them and ship them to that little island that nobody lives off the coast of South America that's filled with the deadliest spiders and snakes known to man, I think that would be a perfect place for them to go live. It's not fair. We have to take each and every case on an individual level, because we are individuals. We can think for ourselves, and so we should deal with every individual case of the group collective as their own case. I don't know how we fix the issue. 80% of me says it's not fixable. I don't think we can. I don't think there's a way to unite America at this point. But at the same time, I'm not ready to stoop to their level. They want a civil war. They can pretend to have their civil war, right? I'm not playing the game. And I think that's the best course of action for us. Normal, sane, rational conservatives is we just need to stay in our house, shelter in place, and ignore these lunatics. And at some point, they're going to push the line too far. And when they do, I'm quite sure Trump will use the military. We have the largest military in the entire frickin' world. The United States is not going to fail, is not going to cave in on itself to a group of crazy Marxist extremists on the left. No matter how many millions of them there are, for that matter. Even if every single Democrat in that country, which is half of this country, even if half of this country decided that they were full in civil war, even half of this country could not stand up to the U.S. military. They couldn't. So yeah, my suggestion is sane individuals, stay in your houses, stay away from the craziness, don't engage, let them hang themselves, give them all the rope and let them hang themselves, and when they've hung themselves too far, well, we send in the military and deal with them. That's ultimately, I think, our best playbook at this point. Because I don't see a way to heal this divide. I have one other idea. I think maybe the U.S. could split apart. We could separate the red and the blue states once and for all. I think it would be rather extreme, but so is the Civil War, right? That's pretty extreme. So rather than having senseless violence, maybe we could somehow peacefully separate the red and the blue states and split the United States into two different states with two wildly different political viewpoints. I think that could be a possibility and might be one seriously worth looking into if it would save bloodshed. But yeah, so that's my musings and my ramblings on the craziness that we're watching unfold before us. This bizarre tribal identity politics mentality wrapped up into the Marxist facade. And most of these people don't even know what Marxism is. They don't know that they're Marxists. They have no clue that they're a Marxist, right? All they know is that they're being oppressed. They're being oppressed by the government. They're being oppressed by the police. They're being oppressed by this place people. They're being oppressed by that people. They are just the most oppressed people on the planet. But they're not. They're not. I mean, God, I wish there was a way to take some of these privileged, clueless young Americans and stick them in a third world country for a few years so they could really see what the rest of the world's like. I mean, at some point, I really think that service in the military for 4 years should be mandatory to every freaking person in the United States, just so that they could go see the world and discover the rest of the world and know the privilege that they live in and understand that they're not oppressed. I wish there was a way to create freaking time machine to send them back to times of real oppression and see how they could have handled, I don't know, back when the Protestants and various different religions were breaking away from the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. That would have been a very interesting time to send some of these people to. See how they could have handled the Pope's army of inquisitors coming around trying to purge them and burning them at the stake. Now that's real oppression, right? That's what oppression was really like. They don't have a clue what oppression is. It's disappointing. It is really disappointing. The United States, if you're a patriot, you believe that the United States is the greatest country on the face of the planet. In fact, a lot of other countries used to think that. A lot of other countries used to look up to us. But now our youngest generation, our crazy generation, believes that the United States needs to be ripped down, torn apart, destroyed, gutted from the inside. How have we gone from that to that? I remember the Reagan years when I was proud, so proud to be an American back then. That's not to say I'm not proud to be an American now, but I don't know. When I watch what my fellow citizens are doing, it certainly sheds a few shadows on my pride, if you will. It makes the light feel a little dark. But yeah, I've rambled about this, I suppose, enough. But yeah, you know, there's kind of the red state, blue state thing. Obviously, having a little enclave in the middle probably wouldn't work so well. Minnesota and Illinois, the crazy liberals in those states would probably need to either go to the West Coast or the East Coast. You know, let the original 13 colonies, if you will, the Maine through Maryland area, and the California, Oregon, and Washington, and Hawaii, just let them go. Let them become the crazy states of the Union, and keep the rest of the red states to include, you know, the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, and Florida as the red states, and Alaska. And I don't know, give a period of time to let people move to their preferred ideological camp, and move on from there. I think that would be the most peaceful way of doing this, maybe the most sensible way of doing this, because I don't know if there's a way to heal the divide in this country anymore. I really don't know. But yeah, I am James Johnson, aka Sulphur Blade. This is my very sad video. Hopefully you didn't enjoy it, because there's nothing enjoyable about this topic. It's downright depressing. But if you agree with me, or if you don't agree with me, then hit that like or dislike button. You know, do your thing. It's what we do on the internet. We shout everyone down, and we sow the seeds of division, and that's not going to change. But yeah, So I'm James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade. This is my content. If so, leave a like and subscribe, and until the next time, all. Peace.